Greetings and welcome, everyone. Welcome to Financial Activism 101, Moving Money and Power with Jasmine Rashid. My name is Missouri Colley, and we are in part two of our two-part series. And I am very, very excited and proud to welcome all of you to our time together. So as I mentioned, my name is Missouri. I'm with the Women's Foundation California. I'm joining you from Nisanon Lands in Sacramento, California. And I want to invite all of you, if you'd like, to please introduce yourselves and where you're joining from in the chat. We also want to acknowledge that at WFC, we do our work on the unceded land of the Lisan Ohlone people and the land of hundreds of other indigenous tribes up and down the state of California. Rooted in this history and the present, we recognize the atrocities committed against indigenous tribes and the pillaging of land of which we are now the inadvertent and troubled beneficiaries. As such, we are committed to the acknowledgement and action that supports reciprocity and the restoration of the right relationship between land, people, and power. And I'm very proud to share that since 2022, we have committed to paying a yearly Shumi land tax to the Segorite Land Trust as part of our continued work to support efforts of rematriation and returning Indigenous land to Indigenous hands. So just want to share that all with you. And as you enter, please also share with us where you're joining, as well as your name if you'd like. A few other things to note is that we have captioning enabled on this call. So if you'd like to use that feature, please turn it on in your toolbar under More and then select Show Captions. Jasmine will have an opportunity to respond to your questions during our session. We also have the Q&A featured enabled for this purpose. So please go ahead and post your questions there. Any questions we don't get to, we will collect them and we'll make sure in a follow-up email and blog post that you get those questions answered. So for those of you who we were able to accommodate with the free book for joining this series, you should have received an email from bookshop.org. If you have not received any communication, I think up until this point, unfortunately, we've exhausted our book count for that part of our event, but we just want to thank you all who supported by registering and also by donating to support our future economic justice programming. We are very grateful to you for that. So as I mentioned in our last call at WFC, we believe that we'll get further together towards addressing systemic inequalities, redistributing resources, and building a more equitable future. We're honored to share space with you as we continue to celebrate the Financial Activist Playbook, and we're so honored to be with author and activist Jasmine Rashid. As a financial activist, writer, and impact investing professional, she successfully supported the Families Belong Together coalition in shifting billions of dollars in big bank financing away from the migrant detention and private prison industry. In her role as director of impact for Candide Group, she helps investors flow their money to predominantly women and BIPOC-led, justice-focused companies, funds, and vital organizations that are building the next economy. So I'm very, very, very honored to introduce Jasmine, and I hope that you all enjoy today's session and learn a lot.
Thanks, Missouri. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I am endlessly grateful to Women's Foundation California for hosting me not only once, but twice. Thank you to everyone who was able to attend last week to the book talk with Bia and Kimberly of Bia, CEO of Women's Foundation California, and Kimberly, Director of California Domestic Workers Coalition. The conversation, I'm still buzzing from that conversation and all that I learned in that space. There is a YouTube link if you weren't able to attend. But basically, we're going to build off on the conversation that we had last time about, what is this book? How did it get here? Why does it exist? And why is it releasing into the world right now? And we're going to go deep into the strategies, what actually makes up the Financial Activist Playbook. And so just to give us a little bit of orientation and what we can expect today, this is going to be a 90-minute session. Please, care for yourself, make sure that if you need to get water, food, bio breaks, whatever it is that you need to feel really present and comfortable in this space. Something we will talk about throughout the workshop today is that part of reclaiming finance is also reclaiming our nervous systems and really making sure that we tend to our own well-being so that we can contribute to collective well-being. So take care of yourself, friends. So financial activism for everyday people, I want to talk about, and I will share my screen, which I should know how to do because we've been in Zoom land for years. Okay. Nope, nope, nope. Present, present. Awesome. Cool. So financial activism and feminism. I feel like finance and activism are often not two words that go together, and then just to throw feminism as another layer. But for me, they are inextricably connected. So what we're going to be talking about today is what is the role of financial activism in furthering feminist causes, as well as the role of feminism as a lens that we bring to our financial activism. And so just included this picture here. I think my mom's probably on the call. Thanks, Mom. Um, Grounding us in the reality that financial activism, as we talked about last time, is not something that is exclusionary or something that is only for people who are financial experts or people who consider themselves activists and organizers. It is for everyday people who are eager to live their most full, abundant lives, as well as be able to contribute to collective wealth and well-being in ways that really challenge the kind of us versus them paradigm that I think so many of us have been accultured in. And so as you're going through these strategies with me today and with each other, reminding yourselves to um, think about what a more just economy would look and feel like, not only for future generations, but really tending to our younger selves and what would have made our experiences, around whether it's money trauma or just our understanding of finance in the world growing up, bringing that same lens of play and curiosity and care for ourselves in this space. So for me, that looks like imagining myself joyful in a Barbie Jeep with a little baby doll in my driveway as a kid. Um, but yeah, the book that y'all are receiving, if you have not already, or if you want to order it through whatever your preferred local bookstore is, really is the guide for all of the strategies that we're going to be talking about today. And it comes with really intentional prompts and questions for you to walk through on your own time to really go deeper into these strategies that we're going to be giving the overview of today. And so each strategy is going to include kind of the what is it? What are we actually talking about here? We're going to have little interactive pieces with each, talking about kind of getting a sense of how we're feeling in the room about these different strategies. And then we're going to do sharing out some resources and offerings, all of which will be shared afterwards. So don't, feel like you need to be copying and pasting all the links, but just if you want them sooner rather than later, they're accessible to you. And then we're going to finish off with some uh, group discussion. We're going to do some reflections and some reflection prompts in small breakout groups as well as collectively. And the goal today is really for y'all to be able to walk away feeling like, okay, I have my next best step in my financial activist journey, and knowing that what that looks like for you is totally contextual and to your lived experience, and may look very different from someone else's and where they are in their journey. So holding ourselves and each other with grace, and excited to experiment. So let's get into the strategies, shall we? Oh, one more thing. What are we actually talking about when we talk about kind of shifting our current extractive economic system? We are talking about, and this ties back to the kind of fundamental role of feminism in our society, is how do we move from an ecosystem, an economy, a culture of scarcity to one of abundance, understanding the reality that there is enough to go around. How do we move finance from something that lives in the world of gatekeeping to something that is deeply accessible? how do we move from greed to generosity, from grinding to flowing, and thinking about the ways in which money is just a tool, right? It's a resource that we want to be able to flow more easily in and out of our lives. And how do we collectively shift from a paradigm of wealth hoarding, which has been increasing? We talked a little bit last time about financialization and the ways in which our financial systems have engineered profit motivation and moving money away from everyday working class, middle class people to the billionaire class. How do we reverse those trends in this really critical time of the great wealth transfer when over the next 20, 30 years, the majority of wealth is going to be moved for the first time in history to the hands of women, right? Just by virtue of the fact that people are inheriting large sums of money, women or women in the workforce. So women are going to play a really fundamental role in setting the tone for our next economy. And how do we make sure that we are not recreating the harmful power dynamics of patriarchal, white supremacist, extractive capitalism, just with more women at the top, right? That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to fundamentally shake up the ways in which money moves and the ways in which we value people, planet, care in our economy. So from wealth hoarding to wealth spreading for the abundance and well-being of everyone. Okay, now officially, strategy one. So the first strategy is one of my favorites, and also a funny one because people may look at talking about money and the idea of just talking, but that's not really like a hard tactic or strategy or something that feels maybe as tangible as like investing or some of the other ones that we'll get into. But talking about money is fundamentally key and radical in a lot of ways to the ways that we currently approach our system. So I'm actually going to read each chapter of the book starts with a little signpost of like, what are we moving away from and what are we moving towards? So for the talking about money strategy, we, and I thought I had these marked. One second. This is my copy of the book that I needed. Okay, so if we're talking about money, what we're moving away from is an extractive financial system where talking about money is often taboo. It's lacking transparency. It's individualistic and straight up confusing. What we're moving towards is a regenerative financial system in which talking about money is normalized, open, community centric, and accessible. So by reclaiming how and why we talk about money, we become equipped to spot and challenge financial exploitation, which we talked a lot about last time, and the kind of trend of wage theft. We become equipped to get clear about our personal and collective goals related to finance and money, and we empower others to join in the movement for crafting a fairer economy. And so we're going to do a quick interactive. If you could write in the chat, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think about money? Just one word. Open the chat here. Okay. I'm seeing class, flow, complicated, power, power, lots of power, scary, freedom, capitalism, class, access, scarcity, capitalism, wealth, capitalism, power, anxiety, need, save, security, opportunity, scarcity, freedom, fear, complicated, investment, stress, inequality, greed, land back, beautiful, life, ease, energy, control. Oh, thank you. Thank you for filling this chat so quickly. With a lot of nuance, right? Money is something that can be stressful and it is something that can promote balance. It is something that can be really shadowy and taboo and something that can be exciting. And so one of the resources that I love to lift up, which folks, if you know me, know are already familiar with this, a resource that I point to and profile in the book around the strategy of talking about money is the Trauma of Money community. So essentially the trauma of money is an online learning community in which people are invited to decrease shame and increase discernment around money and money making decisions. So essentially, it's understanding that all of us, to one degree or another, have some form of trauma under capitalism, right? And sometimes that's a really jarring statement. Especially, a word like trauma, it's a big word and one that shouldn't be used lightly. But when we think about trauma not only as kind of a singular event, trauma is what happens internally in the body, in the person, when they experience something that questions their sense of safety, security, or identity. And so I know for myself, I'm not someone who has necessarily experienced scarcity in terms of not knowing where my next meal is going to come from. And that is an absolute blessing. And I have seen the ways in which capitalism has made me question my own identity and value in the world, right? And the constant process of trying to understand and situate myself within that can feel pretty traumatic at times. And it's something that I have to be really intentional about healing and working towards so that when I am in spaces organizing with other people, when I'm looking at my own finances, I'm able to regulate my own nervous system in ways that make it so I'm not reacting, right, to just what a situation is and the kind of fight or flight response, but I'm actually proactively making decisions and claiming agency. And so talking about money is such an undervalued step in the greater work of financial activism. And a few kind of sample activities that I propose in the book. So every piece of the book is every strategy of the book proposes an example for you to go deeper that is personal, one that you can do alone, and then one that is collective, one that you can do with others. So, a personal example is that you can write out your own money story, or you can put it in a voice note, or you can begin to explore it. Not have all the answers. I often prompt people, and there's a set of questions in the book that ask you to think about and contextualize yourself and your relationship with money from the perspective, what is your ancestral story around money? Where has wealth been, not been? What do you know? What don't you know? Moving to what was your growing up story about money? What did that look like? How did the absence or presence of money impact your ways of understanding the world? And then what's your current story? How are you currently thinking about the role of money? Again, what are these words that are coming up? Do these immediate words resonate with how you felt when you were younger? And then moving forward to what do we want our future money stories to be, individually and collectively? So what would it look like if our individual and collective words or associations with money had a more positive feel? They felt more liberating. So I'll actually ask you now to also write in the chat, what do you want your future association with money to feel like? If you could also just choose one word. Um, yes, power, balance, ease, connection. Beautiful. Um, I also want to name, it looks like I don't have to incentivize y'all to use the chat and interaction function. One thing that we are going to be doing at the very end, that I'm super excited about and grateful for the Women's Foundation team for figuring out how to do in such a fun way, is we are going to be taking all of the names in the chat and putting them into a random generator thingy for a raffle. And so someone at the end of this is going to be the winner of a copy of the book, which many of you already have, as well as a little letter from me and some stickers and a discussion guide zine and a little reclaim wealth and collective well-being matchbox and just some other kind of fun materials that can accompany you on your financial activist journey. So keep it up with the chat. We love to see it, and we love a good raffle and gift exchange. Um, okay, so I'm going to wrap us up for talking about money now. And we will be sharing in the chat some examples of, again, what the personal and collective opportunities are there and the example resource. But for now, I'm going to move us along, thanks, Allie, to the second strategy, which is banking on ourselves. So again, I'm gonna go to In an extractive financial system, banking institutions have normalized short-term profit maximization, predatory lending practices, funding social and environmental devastation, and exploitation of bank customers and communities. Hate to see it. In a regenerative financial system, right, in what we're working towards, banking looks like long-term sustainable investments, ethical and inclusive lending practices, funding social and environmental thriving, and empowerment of bank customers and communities. So by reclaiming how and why we bank, we help our savings grow, which is a really important part of kind of personal finance and well-being. And we help make sure that our dollars, while they're in banking institutions, are actually flowing towards building a fairer economy. And this one is really near and dear to my heart. Folks may remember from our last session, I talked a little bit about my entryway into this big world of financial activism. And for me, it was in the summer of 2018 when, just as a quick recap, there was a lot of news around the fact that migrants were being detained and separated. Families were being separated from one another, and they were being housed in these really terrible for-profit prison corporations that had a direct profit incentive to lock up as many people as possible for as long as possible. Who was actually funding, this massive growth in incarceration? Were our big bank partners, the places where we as everyday, Americans often keep our savings and our depository accounts. That money was being lent out, right, to help fund this industry until everyday people stood up and said, no, the same way we don't want you funding fossil fuels, or militarization or apartheid, we also don't want you funding private prisons or the private prison industry. And so the work of everyday people in financial activism was really drawing attention to what our dollars are doing when they're sitting in the bank, and then leveraging our ability as customers of these banks to advocate and say, hey, we're going to actually move our accounts if you don't align with these human rights principles that we're sharing. So in this case, this is a picture that I took outside of the Wells Fargo. This was in 2019. It was Valentine's Day. Wells Fargo headquarters here in San Francisco, where we had a public protest where we delivered thousands of petitions in the form of love letters to Wells Fargo, asking them to break up with private prisons. Which eventually they would go on to do. It took a lot of time and effort. But banks are, not designed to be accountable to everyday people. Traditional banks are designed to be accountable to shareholders. And so what we'll talk a little bit about more in this strategy is what are our other options in addition to the traditional big banks. So the question that I have for y'all to answer is going to be a poll that we're going to pull up. What is your current primary banking institution? I'll just give y'all a second to fill that out. Remember, this is a judgment-free zone. There is no shame in whatever your reality and truth is. Coming back always to this concept that capitalism thrives when we sit in shame. And so we get to be really clear and intentional about the reality of what our money is currently doing in the world so that we can make decisions about where it's going. Okay. Cool. So I'm seeing most people have some form of bank, which is great because for many people in our country and in our unceded territories, banking is not an accessible option, but it is, with all of its faults and room for improvement, it is an incredibly powerful tool for ensuring that our money is safe and that it can grow with the magic of compounding interest. Awesome. So great, 100% answered. Thank you, everyone. So it looks like the majority have big national banks, which is totally expected. We have quite a few people who also have a credit union. In the book, I talk about my experience maintaining my account at a big bank. And then as I started to actually for this book project, find new ways to flow money into my life, I wanted to have a separate account in which I could easily track that money, as well as make sure and understand that it's only going to things that are locally in my community and really helping support that. And so for me, the opportunity to open a credit union wasn't a complete, okay, I'm going to change every single financial decision in my life and now do this. It was, let me start a new account where I can easily track my money. And that's something that I've heard other people really appreciate on their financial activist journey. Um, so, oh, sorry, I meant to share. Okay, so just to kind of tie this strategy up, in the book, again, we offer personal and collective opportunities. So the personal one here is I would offer the opportunity to shift your deposits to a local credit union or community bank. Again, because when money is able to sit in a depository institution that is actually lending to things like affordable housing, to non-extractive small business loans, you're actively able to flow money within a community as opposed to going directly to shareholder pockets who don't need any more of our money. Um, the collective opportunity there is pretty similar in that it asks us to think about the ways in which we might want to advocate for systematic change and who actually owns the banking system. We don't have time to get into all the nuances and exciting developments in the world of public banking, but one resource I really do want to share is friendsofpublicbanking.org. There are really amazing organizing spaces and institutions and nonprofits that are pushing for legislation to make the reality of everyday people owned banks a thing, which is a thing in many of your countries, just not yet here robustly in the United States. There is one in North Dakota. But essentially, in addition to tending to our own savings and bank accounts, we also have the ability to push for collective change so that we fundamentally restructure the banking systems to be accountable to people and the planet. So I'm going to move us along to strategy 3. Okay, strategy 3 is flexing some buying power. Lots of feelings around this one, but to get us oriented, in an extractive financial system, i.e., our current financial system, consumerism fuels the exploitation of people and the planet, manipulates consumers, prioritizes short term gratification, and flows wealth out of local communities. In a regenerative financial system, consumerism is right sized to support people and the planet, empower consumers, prioritize long term value, and circulate wealth within local communities. So, by reclaiming how, what, and why we buy, we can collectively influence which businesses we leave behind in the extractive economy and which will flourish alongside us into the future. Um, so let's do this really quick. In the chat, write or shout out your favorite values aligned local business where you live. So write what the business is, and then write, so business is anywhere where you buy products or services, right? And then where it's located. So we can do a little bit of mapping and I'll read them out of where folks are and where they are using their money to support. So let's see. We have City Greens Market in St. Louis, Missouri, Ashland Food Co-op in Ashland, Oregon, Singona's in Redwood City, Penzeys Spices, Rainbow Grocery, collectively owned by employees. We love it. Oh, we had 2 back to back. San Francisco, shout out. Frontline Farming in Denver, Flatbush Food Co-op, New York City, Ace Hardware, locally operated in Half Moon Bay, very cool. All the mom and pop restaurants, Yank's Kitchen, yes, Reparations Book Club in Los Angeles, Kismet in Illinois, Reams in Oakland, Grits and Waffles, Los Angeles, and so many more. Love these. Make sure you take some time to go through the chat and, oh gosh, shout out Berkeley Bowl. That is a staple in my life. Yeah, see who else is in your community in this virtual space and how you can continue to patron the same types of institutions. One thing that I really encourage people to do in the book is to actually take some time to make a little map, like a patron map, whether it's a notes app on your phone or something more sophisticated and fancy like a Google Doc or using the actual like Google Maps, um, putting together um, a map of like, here's all the local places that you'd be really sad if they went out of business because they contribute to the local vibrancy of your culture in your particular region where you live. And so there isn't a kind of one size fits all, like this is what qualifies it to be, a values aligned business in the kind of next economy, solidarity economy. This is again where we can rely on the principles, right, that we've talked a little bit about of the just transition framework of solidarity economies. But in the tapestry that we are building of a next economy, we need a variety of businesses that offer a variety of products and services. And so that means that we want to have worker-owned cooperatives. And some may not be worker-owned cooperatives, but they may be meaningfully building wealth and sharing profit in ways that benefit local communities. They may be alternatives to the big boers that are further pushing gentrification and really disrupting the culture of individual places. And so um, the example that I have here in the picture, I'm reminding myself, is just a really creative example of how we can move our businesses and places where we shop from kind of that piece around just pure competition to cooperation and collaboration, right? How do we make sure that our buying is not only is transactional but also relational? So I want to shout out here the initiative Taco Trucks at Every Mosque. This is something I came across in Orange County, where it began under Trump administration when anti-immigrant sentiment against both Muslims and Arabs, as well as folks from Latin America, were really at an all-time high. And there was a lot of divide and conquer politics that we often see both in our larger culture and our economies. And so what Rita Hamid and the Latin Muslim Unity Group did was they started showing up at mosques with taco trucks that were serving halal meat and saying like, hey, we can actually break bread together and be much stronger at both as an economic force, but also as a political force when we are bridging across class divides. And the best way to do that, food. Um, they've also done really great things like outside of just providing food and selling food, doing things like voter registration and COVID vaccines and having it all be meeting people where they are. And so looking for these really creative opportunities to maximize what our dollars are doing when they're buying and finding opportunities in your local community or online where um, you're able to support the ecosystem as opposed to just one individual owner of a business. So wrapping us up here, the personal offer here is to create your own Patriot map and be a local solidarity economy ambassador. And the collective opportunity here is to begin sourcing your organization's needs from solidarity economy aligned businesses. So, for example, let's say you're at, you're at your workplace, you're having an all staff meeting. You could order from Panera, or you could order from a really amazing mom and pop shop, right? That the dollar is going to go farther there. One example resource I will also share is the 15% pledge, which folks may be familiar with. It is the initiative by Aurora James, started in 2020, I believe, to ask these big brands from Sephora to Target, what percentage of your shelf space is actually going to Black creators and supply chain? Because Black folks represent 15% of the population, but are often widely underrepresented in terms of their brands being able to be in these marketplaces. And so organizations like Sephora have signed on to increase the representation of Black founders and businesses. And I think it's a really creative way to just begin understanding again where our dollars are flowing and why. Awesome. So I'm loving all the chatty. Okay, strategy for giving and receiving. So the orientation I want to offer here is that in an extractive financial system, philanthropy is a tool of the wealthy, to keep things as they are, to reinforce unhealthy power dynamics, and transactional in nature. Um, in a regenerative financial system, philanthropy is a tool for reparations and real systems change. It empowers all involved and fosters a sense of mutuality and sustainability. And I want to note that when I'm using the term philanthropy, I'm not just talking about folks who are philanthropists with a capital P, right, and are seen as who we get to deem philanthropists, but really owning our role every day as philanthropists who are able to make really intentional gifts with our money. So by reclaiming how and why we give and receive money, we can generously fund the ease and fulfillment we've long deserved. So, poll time. Where does the majority of philanthropic funding currently come from? What's your best guess? Individual donors, foundations, corporations, government grants. Okay. Last chance to put in your answer. Okay, so the reality is, so we have about 45% of people saying individual donors, 34% foundations, 8% corporations, 14% government grants. The answer is individual donors, and not necessarily individual high net worth donors. Um, the reality is that the majority of philanthropic giving in the United States is by everyday people, who aggregately are able to move much more money than single foundation grants, who are only required for the most part to activate 5% of their finances on a yearly basis. Um, where the other 95%, right, let's think about their endowments, could be investing directly in the things that they are granting towards. So maybe they're granting towards clean energy, at the same time as they're unknowingly or knowingly invested in fossil fuels by virtue of the stock market. So individual donors play a really important role in really deciding who and why we get funded. I think the statistic about kind of institutional funding for women of color is less than 1%. Someone may have the exact stat, but it's not more than 1%. um, and so we really need to think about reclaiming our role um, as as givers, but not only as givers, but as receivers, right? So the picture I put here is of my daddy, of my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago now. And like anyone who has, experienced loss, it's a strange period, and you're getting, hopefully if you're in community like I was, my family and I were getting really beautiful flowers and plants and cards, and those were all really meaningful. The thing that made me cry was my friend Maya made a donation in my grandmother's name um, to an organization, Project New Yorker in New York, that really works to support Bangladeshi and South Asian immigrant women intergenerationally with the social safety nets and mutual aid that they need to survive and thrive in a country that was not built for them. And so that was a really eye-opening moment for me of thinking about all of the opportunities that are hard and joyous and exciting, from birthdays to death anniversaries to holidays, to think about how we can make donations to the organizations and the frontline organizers who make our lives more vibrant, right? And so the offer that I have here is to really, next time you know, look at an opportunity to celebrate. Let's just go with that. Next time you have a big celebration coming up, what might be something that feels aligned where you can also spread some of that joy and some of that wealth with a nonprofit or an organization who is actively also contributing to whatever it is you're trying to build in your life. So my personal ask here is for you just to begin reflecting on some times when you both gave and received financial wealth, um, sitting with what that experience feels like. And then the collective part, which is really, really fun, is around giving circles. One I profile in the book, who I got to celebrate with in person here in Oakland, is Hello Heart Oakland. They're an Asian American Pacific Islander giving circle that really started as kind of just friends, which became family, who would share these beautiful meals, like home cooked meals around a big table, and began seeing the ways in which they could individually make donations to support the local culture and ecosystem of Asian immigrants, specifically and Asian women in the Bay Area, and then realized they also were connected to networks of wealth that they hadn't previously tapped by virtue of um, some worked at corporations where there was employee um, donor matching, right? They could find these sponsorship opportunities. They began going to Warriors games together and inviting in community, and they began hosting these other kind of public events where asking people to collectively decide what they want to fund, and how they want to fund. They're able to move so much more money than they would be able to individually. And so giving circles are all around the world, as well as in many places locally. And so if there isn't a giving circle, it is something that is always available for you to start, whether it's something that's just a casual passing around a hat versus something that has a fiscal sponsorship that is a little bit more structured, within kind of the traditional philanthropy. Um, and then the last resource I want to share is a mutual aid resource that is called Well Money. It is an online giving platform where I think you can give like $5 a month, where essentially it's a trust-based system where anyone can tap into that if they need, for example, last-minute support in helping pay their rent or getting their groceries, or they have a medical emergency. This was founded by Courtney Ziegler, Dr. Courtney Ziegler, put some respect on his name, who made this really amazing mutual aid system and technology, and began to realize that the people who were putting in to this system were also the same people who were pulling out when they needed it and then putting back in, right? So it really challenges the kind of traditional power dynamics and notions of just one person is a giver, one person is a receiver, which leads us to our next strategy, which is how do we show up for one another beyond money? So getting us oriented here, in an extractive financial system, money has an outsized role in how we identify and create value, in reinforcing an individualistic culture, and in defining what's seen as a valid way to support others. In a regenerative financial system, money is just one form of capital. Our culture champions collectivism and strong safety nets, and mutual aid is central to how we belong to communities and to each other. By reclaiming how and why we show up for one another, we make visible the existing networks of wealth all around us and open up new opportunities for community thriving. So, in the chat, write some examples of types of capital or wealth that go beyond financial capital. And we'll see if that was enough of a leading question to see what comes up. Okay, skill sharing, friendship. Oh, that's from one of my friends who I've had since kindergarten. Hey, MK. Intellectual, cultural, gardening, food growing, time, water, time, volunteering, medical knowledge, space, relationships, housing, community emotional support. Yep, social capital. That's something that we hear a lot. Mentorship, growth. Beautiful. Just being. Car. Yep. Care capital. Ooh, I love that term. I haven't heard that term before. Beautiful. Connection, expertise. Very cool. Love, nature. I hate this term, spiritual capital. Mental health, empirical knowledge. Okay, so as we see, there is no shortage of wealth in this room, virtual room, in our larger communities, but how we actually identify and ascribe value to those forms of capital and resources is not always visibilized under capitalism, right? We have a paradigm in which financial capital is the kind of associated, like we saw earlier, with ultimate power, in ways that we really don't take advantage of or leverage all of the networks of wealth around us, in ways that could contribute to our own and collective well-being. So I won't spend too much time diving into like what mutual aid is. There's really great resources for kind of going deeper on what that is, and why it is so critical, in every iteration and stage of humanity, right? Especially moving forward. The picture that I included here is from like a week ago. It's from Thursday. Some folks in this space were also there in the room at Kinfolks in Oakland, for the Oakland book launch, celebration of the Financial Activist Playbook. And something I was so like just in awe to be able to facilitate was a really casual and kind of speed offers and needs market. So folks here may be familiar with offers and needs market. I think I saw some representation from the Post Growth Institute. Shout out to them who trained me in the offers and needs market facilitation. So real quick, offers and needs markets are a social technology, part ancient wisdom, part facilitated exercises, where people are asked to be in community in a really structured way, and share an offer that they are excited to make, that they have access to, that they are passionate about. So it could be tangible or intangible. It could be anything from, you know, I'm really good at organizing and can help people organize their closets and find joy in that. I'm really good at, I speak multiple languages and love helping people practice, in Spanish or whatever their language might be. It could be you are really connected in a certain industry, or you are really good at gardening, so many levels of expertise and capital and offerings that people are not often asked about. And so when they get the opportunity to actually share their offers, you start to see some magic happening of people realizing their value, you know, in and outside of traditional capitalism. And so after everyone is offer, they are then also asked to share a need. And that need could be financial or non-financial, tangible or non-tangible. So it could be, I'm in a really tough situation with my landlord, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. And maybe I need advice for, a pro bono lawyer, or I am trying to understand like end of life care for a family member and would love to talk to someone who has gone through that experience. Or I need help. I need budgeting templates for my personal budget. There is no shortage of needs, and no one need is, necessary. It's all contextualized, right? And so, what the offers and needs market does is it gives us the experience of actually claiming to one another and the universe what we need and what we have to offer, in ways that we're really planting seeds beyond just a one-to-one transaction. But we've seen in spaces where someone mentioned cars earlier, where someone's like, I have an old car that's been sitting in my driveway that I need to donate. And then someone else in the group is able to go to a friend outside of the group and be like, hey, don't you need a car? I know someone who's trying to give away a car if you just go and pick it up, right? So the beauty of these spaces is about planting seeds and mapping our networks of wealth, not just in that immediate moment, but also in the larger work of community building and wealth building. So my personal offer, here as a exercise or reflection, is just to identify your personal experiences with mutual aid and how or when that has been present in your life. And the collective is to host an offers and needs market among your friend group, at work, wherever you kind of convene people and have some existing level of trust. The offersandneeds.com, set up by the Post Growth Institute, offers a whole host of resources, templates, online trainings to actually be able to just build some skills and confidence around that. But the really beautiful thing about this technology is that anyone can do it. So I will leave you with that to move us along to the next session. Yay, thanks, Crystal. Yes, please connect with Crystal for any and all offers and needs related inquiries. Okay, the next strategy, maybe not always the sexiest, but we're going to talk about budgets. And so budgets have a few meanings, but essentially it's just the management of money. The same way we use words like economy, right, which can feel really kind of abstract and maybe intimidating. Economy just means, from its Latin roots, the management of home, right? And budgets play a similar role. How are we managing the resources so that we are optimizing our well-being? And we get to decide what that well-being looks like and what enough looks like to us in our own personal context. So, in an extractive financial system currently, budgets are treated as just numbers, prioritizing cost cutting over sustainability and well-being. In a regenerative financial system, in what we're trying to build, budgets are a tool of empowerment. They prioritize sustainability and well being over short term gains. So, by reclaiming how and why we budget, we can joyfully reprioritize our personal finances and build democratic control over collective finances so that we can have all of our needs and most of our wants met. Um, Okay. This one we're gonna ask people to share in the chat, but also if you feel called to come off mute, but maybe we'll do 3 or 4 people to come off mute and share the response to this prompt, which is, what does financially enough feel like to you in this moment? And don't overthink it. It could be a word, it could be a sentence. If you want to come off mute and share, let's think a little bit about what financially enough means and how we can orient that around how we craft enough budgets. Anyone feeling brave? Susan says, enough feels like feeling secure and having enough to do what I want and not just what I need. Beautiful. Confidence in my future financial stability, money, peace, connected and value. Awesome.
Having being able to, like somebody just said, to do what I want when I want, and not going, being able to go on a vacation. And not go, oh God, I have to work because I work for myself. So I have to work extra days in order to go on vacation. And that's even more stressful than trying to do anything else. So being able just to say, you know what, I want to go away and not have to worry about it. Like my mother used to say, going on vacation scared.
Mm, yes. What would it feel like to not go on vacation scared? That's so, so real. What about for other folks? What's coming up?
I know at the organization level for a lot of nonprofits, the idea that we always say is having enough so eventually we don't have to exist. You know what I mean? Like we've done the work, everyone is like stable. So I think that's kind of what I think of when I think of having enough.
Super interesting. Yeah. I see Luz, you have your hand up.
I would say like housing.
Mhm.
Housing is like the basis of it. I feel like if you have a home base, you're able to build off of that. And I've seen that within my own family who's like pushed for home ownership or pushed for like, hey, you have to invest in this because you need a piece of being part native kind of plays into that a bit. But I see how housing has played a big part in like financial well-being.
Yes, so real. We might have time for one more person if someone else wants to share what's coming up for them. Natalia.
I think part of feeling financially stable is knowing that I can help out my loved ones if they need it. Just like having that stability, like if anyone's in a crisis, I can come through for them. It's really important to me.
Wow, thank you. Oh, so many beautiful reflections. I'm scrolling through the chat too, and definitely want to go back and savor some of what we're putting out. I think again, because often in finance we don't get asked what enough looks like, right? There's just an assumption in our larger dominant capitalist culture that there is no such thing as enough, right? Accumulate, 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 get as much as possible. And that leads to the reality in which we see massive wealth hoarding, where there isn't enough to go around, where, um, you know, it's not only harming people who are now not able to access their basic needs and desires, right? Everything from housing to vacation, but it's also harming, and someone on a spiritual level, the folks who are doing that hoarding, right? For anyone who works in wealth management, when we talk about money trauma, the billionaires have money trauma too, right? The multimillionaires. It's just not something that we have collectively addressed in ways that we get to define what enough means. And so at the personal level, something that I offer in the book is I profiled some friends who I really admire, who made an enough budget for their own family. So they have one daughter and they're a couple, and they're thinking through, okay, what does enough look like for us? Right? Not caring about what the outside world is, maybe telling us, or the kind of traditional rules of finance. What kind of quality of life do we want to have? And with our shared skills and labor, what would it look like to actually craft and design, in enough, um, design a life that centers around this question of enough and constantly comes back to it. Folks may hear that and think, that is an extreme privilege, right? To be able to even have the mental space to be able to claim and think about what enough means for us and to be able to dream. But I also think that it's really necessary to give ourselves permission to think about and start to lay out, whether it's putting into words or I do vision boarding, thinking about what enough means for us individually. That helps us build the muscles of thinking about how we want to shift things collectively. So experimenting with your own personal finance and enough budgetings is the personal offer here. The collective invitation, and I think I saw folks from PBP, is to invite community members to design a people's budget. So the example that I love to give here, and my first kind of real encounter was walking around Lake Merritt here in Oakland, and someone had wrote in chalk on the ground, really neatly, shout out to them. Here's what's in the Oakland city budget for this year. I'm forgetting exactly which year it was. And it laid out, here's how much goes to policing. Here's how little goes to affordable housing. Here's how also little goes to mental health and healthcare and childcare. And they laid out and saying, here's the reality. Let's understand that budgets are moral documents, right? They demonstrate what we value collectively, and they're also using our tax dollars. It's not just like, some money that has just come out of the air. It is coming from us collectively. So the Participatory Budgeting Project and other participatory budgeting organizations, the work of helping people experience what it's like to actually have democratic control, at least to a degree, over their municipal, county, school budgets. We see this a lot happening in public schools with youth. People being able to democratically participate and really vote and rank and say, here's what is missing in our community. Here's what we need more of. And then that tool you're able to bring to the city council meetings, you're able to actually be in conversation. And in some cases, the working with, local government to carve out either full or partial parts of the budget and saying, okay, you have $1 million, do, do, what makes the most sense with it. This has been something that is kind of, accredited to starting in Brazil. But it's something that we have seen increasing all around the world and is increasing here in the United States as well. And so check out Participatory Budgeting Project and all the ways in which we can begin to start claiming our role over large budgets of money. Okay. I'm realizing I'm taking too much time because I'm having too much fun with these strategies. So I'm gonna speed through the next two ones a little bit faster. And so the next one is a really big topic that definitely took me the longest to write. One, because I work in the world of investing, and two, because there is so much in investing that I feel like we need to unpack. But just to give us some quick orientation, when we're talking about leveraging the magic of investing, currently in the extractive financial system, that looks like investing being a tool of the 1%, focused on profiting from industries that harm people on the planet and moving wealth away from everyday people, creating short-term financial gains without creating real value in the world. In a regenerative financial system, investing is a tool accessible to the everyday person and focused on contributing to industries that support people and the planet, redistributing wealth that has been stolen through financialization, and creating long-term wealth, building collective well-being. By reclaiming how and why we invest, we can redirect the flow of money away from corporate control and Wall Street and into everyday abundance and Main Street. Okay, poll question. Do you know what you're invested in? Again, no judgment zone. Going strong in the sort ofs category. Awesome. Okay. So we got a lot of folks feeling sort of, a few folks feeling completely, wondering if they're investment professionals or just really attuned. You can let me know. Yeah, someone else I trust handles that for me. That's really big. And yes, wait, I'm invested in something. These are all really valid answers. And again, there isn't one expectation of you should or you shouldn't. And the reason is because our, at least on the public side, when we talk about, markets like the stock market or public investment or investments into publicly owned companies, and funds, it's often pretty hard to actually determine what we're invested in. So let's say you go into your 401k account if you're one of the people who works at an institution, which, quick plug, for all the faults of our retirement systems and corporate policies, I think the stat is that over half of people who work for kind of a corporation or a company have access to employer matching into their retirement accounts, right? Into their 401ks or whatever the vehicle may be, which means that the employer has money to contribute and match how much you put into your own retirement savings. I think only 25% of people are actually leveraging and using that. And it makes sense, right? It's not something that I think necessarily HR is spending a whole lot of time or has the capacity to be like, hey, there's free money on the table, you should probably take it. But just a little advice. If you are already doing that, what would it look like to check in on your colleagues, your friends, and just prompt them and say like, hey, are you taking advantage of the retirement savings? The question that comes from that is, what are we actually investing in, right? So it's twofold. It's both making sure that we are able to engage in investing in ways that make sure we're able to build wealth, and how do we minimize contributing to aggregate harm? One option that we know about is the inputs of ESG screens. So like I mentioned earlier, environmental social governance screens work to shift out of our portfolios anything that is detrimental to environment, people, planet, and kind of corruption. And we need to constantly be checking in on those pieces, because so often we see things like prisons are not included, right? Or there's always going to be new innovations of how to use our investments to destroy people on the planet for profit. And so the kind of quick offering I have here is to really understand your investments, just as a starting point. And then the collective there is to figure out ways to buy back the block collectively. I'm not going to have time to go into some examples, but I think we'll share some in the chat. And then one example resource I really want to highlight is the Investigate tool from the American Friends Service Committee, who have a online database where you can plug in what you're invested in, and it'll show you the degree to which it is complicit in human rights violations, in apartheid and genocide, in border militarization. So really under-resourced tool there. Okay, and the last strategy before I officially kind of move us out into reflections and breakouts, I know it is a lot that we are throwing at you, is handling our business, which encompasses a lot of things. It is how we design businesses, how we use our labor and leverage our labor collectively. And so the orientation here is, in an extractive financial system, business exploits workers, builds wealth primarily for the owning class, and focuses on profit maximization at the expense of social and environmental impacts. In a regenerative financial system, business empowers workers, builds wealth for those creating value through their labor, and values the impact on people and the planet as much as it values profit generation. By reclaiming how and why we collectively work and don't work, we can creatively multiply flourishing beyond our wildest dreams. So this image is from last week's conversation, in which I mentioned we were in conversation with Kim from California Domestic Workers Coalition, and I love this screenshot where Kim was sharing with us how they were able to determine care workers, nannies, folks caring for the elderly, for childcare, just have historically been exploited, right? By virtue of their migration status, by virtue of not having access to healthcare, all the many layers that come, especially for women of color and immigrant women. And so what they were able to do was really envision what they actually needed in order to value their folks. And they envisioned $35 million and what they would do with that. And they did work of coming back to budgeting and enough and thinking about the value. And this is a slide where Kim shared with us, they won the money. They won the $35 million over the course of 5 years to actually go towards supporting their care workers in their coalition who have for too long been exploited. And so the poll or the question I have for you to lay out in the chat is, what is a personal work non-negotiable that you'd love to claim in the new economy we're building? What does that mean? So maybe it's a goal you want to be able to afford housing without having to stress every month. Maybe it's that you only want to work 30 hours a week, or maybe you don't want to work for money at all. We get to envision and kind of play and experiment, but just share with us what is a non-negotiable that you realistically like to claim in the new economy that we're building when it comes to your labor and how it's valued. Getting paid, healthcare, financial literacy, living wage. Everyone has a place to live, flexibility. Yes. One thing we often hear is that people want, meaning. There we go, Susan, meaning in their work and not just labor for the sake of labor. Wellness. Never work for a company that holds profit as the primary reason for existing. # never again. Ability to retire, flexible schedule, time off for family, mental health. Yes, yes, yes to all of these. Authentic self, values alignment. Beautiful. So my offer here on the personal level is to spend some time laying out your dreams around your labor and work. Not that we dream of labor, but ways in which we can align our business and our work, whether we're entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs working within another company. There's some templates in the book that offer kind of ways to think about your non-negotiables, your nice to haves, and your bells and whistles as you claim agency over your work. And then the collective tool is to stand with workers who are organizing in unions with the action tracker. That is a tool, yes, that we are excited to share, as well as Beloved Economies, which offers 7 practices for designing more just and beloved workplaces. Okay, we made it. We made it through all 8 strategies. I'm like 10 minutes over, but this is great because covered a lot of ground, threw a lot at you. We're going to spend the next 10 minutes in reflection breakout rooms. We're going to be putting you into pairs of 3. And for 10 minutes, I would love for y'all to dive into one financial action, just one, that you can reclaim by Monday. Today is Wednesday. So giving yourself realistically just one thing. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world, but what's one money decision where you can flow money, whether it's $5, $500, $5,000, flow money in line with personal and collective well-being. And take some time, we'll share it in the chat, take some time to share with your members in your group, introduce yourself, share why you chose it. And don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be, again, the perfect, one solution. It doesn't have to be something that, if you don't get 100% right, you're then beating yourself up about. But let's just practice. Share one financial activism act that you're excited to implement by Monday. Yeah. And I think we'll just kind of put us into those groups. Oops. And I can't see if folks are going into groups, but cool. Yep, if you need to sit out, totally fine. Thank you just for being here and honoring yourself. Okay.
Raquel, could you pause the recording?
Cool. Oh, Liza's here. Love you, friend. Hey, welcome back. Hey, are we all back? Awesome. Oh, yeah, I see all the people flooding in. Wow, so many friends. Hey, welcome back. I hope that was not too overwhelming. Appreciate y'all just kind of rolling with it. So just to orient us a little bit, we are not going to have time for Q&A, but like we mentioned up front, we are going to be pulling all of your questions and answering them in a blog post. So please stay connected. Feel free to share any unanswered questions or anything that's sitting with you. Before we open the space for a little bit of reflection back of what y'all talked about in your rooms, we are going to do a raffle. And so I'm going to pass it over to Allie. Thank you for all your participation. Look at how cute that is. So yeah, let's do it. The crazy sound. Hello. Awesome. So Carlo, please make sure, I guess we can grab your email from the registration and I will get your mailing address and send this over to you. Thanks for playing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yay. Okay, so coming back into community mode, let's take maybe 3 minutes. If folks could share in 30 seconds or less, feel free to just come off mute. What came up for you? I know it's a big ask, but let's keep it short and sweet and respect people's time.
I'll share about my group. We had an amazing discussion. I think one thing that came up was how much our identities and experiences as first-generation Americans shapes how we think about these questions. It was a great discussion.
Beautiful, thank you. Who else feels called to speak?
I'm happy to share. Stephanie and Carlo and I actually were chatting, and one of the things that I loved Stephanie sharing was just that during COVID, when they were shutting down their office, they were able to find schools to donate the office things to. And I know that's not tied to exactly what we were talking about, but we did share that we wanted to shop more local, and especially with the holidays coming up, and supporting shops like Penzies or Sagona's or small bookstores, things like that, and local artists.
Beautiful, love it. Crystal.
Hey, one thing that came up in our group was the power of talking about money and related to that for strategy and healing our money trauma. And Jasmine, I just love how you put that discussion guidelines in the back of the book, and super excited to like share this with friends because there's so much healing that can happen when we connect and talk about these things. So thank you.
As the late great Bell Hooks says, rarely, if never, do we heal in isolation, right? Like we need to do the work collectively, even when it's scary. Ooh, Money Healing Club. Let me open that link and not get too distracted, but excited for that. Maybe one more person who wants to share their experience in the breakout room.
I would just say that when we were talking, I think that for me, it was a useful distinction just in my own head to say, I'm not coming up with a final answer. I'm committing to do something, and then I can see if it feels right or wrong, and then I can switch it. So that takes the pressure off from realizing like whatever that first step is. Let me learn if this is right or if this is wrong.
Absolutely. I couldn't have teed up the segue better, Susan. So thank you. And the reason is because this is a playbook for a reason. It is a playbook because it invites us to play and experiment and imagine and craft and design, right? It's not a textbook. It's not saying, here's the 5 things you need to do to be a better, more ethical person with money. No, to be a human and living under capitalism is to navigate contradictions every single day. How can we do that in ways that actually feel collective, that actually feel, um, again, increase our discernment around the decisions we get to make? And the reason that is so important, not only at the individual level, but really at the collective level, is I'm just going to share my screen one final time, is to quote another hero of mine, the late great Alice Walker. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Um, and this quote I come back to time and again because so often we can get caught up in the overwhelm, in the paradox of choice, that it actually is often easier to just think we don't have options, right? To succumb to oppressive systems. When we find one another and we, especially around money, we can see the ways in which our individual dollars can make change, but collectively we're able to, use whatever metaphor you like, of grains of sand versus the beach, right? We're able to make collective change in ways that are, beyond our wildest dreams, but also honoring our wildest dreams. And for, like we talked about before, our wildest dreams can include things like being able to take vacations. It could include things like having dignified funerals and retirements. It could include the ability to create and be compensated fairly for the care that we pour into others. And so I just want to wrap us up by just thanking you so much for being here today. Like I mentioned, this is the 2nd week of my book tour, and I've already just been filled with so much gratitude for the community that we are building. Please do stay in touch. What happens when you sign up for the mailing list, which I think I've already all added you to if you clicked on that, but if you haven't, feel free to go and sign up for that, is you get a digital copy of the discussion guide zine, which Crystal had just mentioned is also in the back of the book. But what this discussion guide zine does is it offers you questions for each of the strategies that you can walk through individually as a reflection question, as prompt size, as well as questions that you can do in community. Again, coming back to the idea of collective power and how do we move tons of money in line with the future that we are building. And so this is great for, if you want to do a book club or work with your family or friend group. Again, all of this is yours to experiment and play with. I am just kind of the conduit to help you navigate some of your options and to really reclaim your power. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about reclamation of wealth and well-being that we are inherently entitled to. So thank y'all. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Yes, shout out to WFC team for zooming excellence.
I made a green room for us if we want to go in it.
People will absolutely be there. Great job, Jasmine.